I found her wandering again. She doesn't know where she is. We need to put her in a home.
For her own safety.
Interesting. Because the only thing she seems confused about is why the woman I married treats her like a servant in her own house.
She's just a maid, David. A woman from the projects you picked up.
That maid worked 3 jobs to buy my first computer.
She didn't just belong in this world, Isabella. She made it possible for you to live in it.
I signed the papers for the nursing home today. Problem solved forever.
Imagine this. A rich man named David Thompson was driving his fancy electric car home. He had been traveling in Japan for 3 weeks for his computer business. He decided to skip his last meeting and surprise his family. David was 41 years old and owned a huge technology company worth $8 billion. But as he parked his car, he wasn't thinking about money. He was thinking about Ruth Williams, the 67-year-old woman who had saved his life when he was just 9 years old. Ruth wasn't the mother who gave birth to David, but she was the only real mother he ever had. When David was a little boy with no family, the adoption system put him in Ruth's small house in Chicago. Ruth was a retired nurse who didn't have much money. She only had her small retirement checks, but she still worked extra hours at 2 different hospitals to pay for David's computer classes. David walked quietly toward the kitchen door. He wanted to surprise Ruth by making her favorite tea, Earl Grey with honey. This was the same tea she used to make for him years ago when he came home sad from school. Other kids had been mean to him because he didn't have a normal family. But then David heard angry voices. He stopped and hid behind a big marble column to listen. "I've told you not to use the front door when I have guests." His wife Isabella's voice was sharp and mean. "What will my clients' wives think when they see you?" "I'm sorry, Mrs. Isabella. I just wanted to." Ruth's voice was quiet and scared. David could hear the fear in her voice. "I don't care what you wanted," Isabella snapped. "You're the maid here, not the queen of the house, just because my husband is strangely attached to you." David felt like his blood turned to ice. Maid? Ruth had moved into their guest room a year ago because David wanted her to live comfortably. She deserved it after everything she had done for him. Isabella had always acted so sweet and caring toward Ruth, at least when David was watching. "I'm not a maid," Ruth said quietly, trying to keep her dignity. "David invited me to live here as family." Isabella laughed in a cruel way. "Family? A black woman from Chicago who took him from an orphanage when nobody else wanted him? Please. The state paid you to take care of him, just like they pay any babysitter." David's expensive briefcase fell from his hands onto the soft rug. For 32 years, Ruth had never told him that the state gave her any money. To David, she had always been simply the woman who chose to love him when everyone else had given up on him. "And another thing," Isabella continued. "Stop leaving your hair in the bathroom drain. It's gross. Starting today, you'll use the bathroom in the basement storage room." "But the basement bathroom doesn't have heat," Ruth said softly. "Then use cold water," Isabella said coldly. "It might teach you that you're not a guest here. You're only allowed to stay because I let you." David slowly walked closer to the kitchen and peeked inside. He saw Ruth, the woman who had worked 16 hours every day to pay for his guitar and computer lessons, hunched over like a hurt bird against the kitchen counter. Her hands were shaking as she held a cup of cold tea. These were the same hands that had comforted him during countless nights when he had bad dreams about being abandoned. "Maybe Isabella is right," Ruth whispered, talking more to herself. "I should have stayed in Chicago. This isn't where I belong." "Exactly." Isabella slammed her hand on the counter hard. "Finally, you understand. You never belonged in this fancy world, Ruth. You can pretend all you want, but you'll always be just a retired nurse from a poor neighborhood trying to be something you're not." That's when David noticed something that broke his heart completely. Ruth was wearing a simple cleaning uniform. Isabella had actually turned the woman who raised a billionaire into a servant. David quietly walked back to the garden. A powerful memory came rushing back to him. He remembered Ruth at age 35, working 3 different jobs to pay for his first computer programming competition. She had told him, "Baby, one day you're going to be so successful that you'll help people like us. But never, ever let anyone make you forget where you came from." Now Ruth was 67 years old. The woman who had given up her best years so David could chase his dreams was being treated terribly in the house that her hard work had made possible. David took out his phone and opened the security camera app for his house. If Isabella was doing this horrible stuff right now when he was home, what had she been doing when he was away for weeks at a time? If this story about betrayal and racism touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe because you'll find out how a man who owed everything to his adoptive mother turned her pain into the greatest lesson about justice that a mean woman ever learned. For 3 hours, David stayed locked in his office, watching weeks of security camera videos. Each video showed another cruel thing that made him feel sick to his stomach. The videos showed Isabella forcing Ruth to eat cold leftover food in the basement while Isabella ate fancy meals in the main dining room. They showed Isabella hiding the heater remote control when David was traveling, leaving Ruth shivering in the cold during California's winter nights. They showed Isabella throwing away letters that came in the mail for Ruth from her old work friends in Chicago. Isabella even threw away important letters from doctors. But there was one video from 2 weeks ago that completely destroyed David's heart. Ruth had cooked a special dinner to celebrate something important. It had been 32 years since she adopted David. She was waiting for David to come home from a work trip in New York. Isabella came home and saw the table decorated with candles and a homemade cake that Ruth had baked with her own painful, arthritic hands. "How sad and pathetic," Isabella said, looking right at the camera as if she knew David would watch it someday. An old black woman pretending to be the mother of a white billionaire. "That's crazy even for you, Ruth." Isabella threw the entire cake in the trash, blew out all the candles, and made Ruth clean up everything before David got home. When David had called from his trip to ask if Ruth enjoyed the surprise he had asked Isabella to organize, flowers, and a special dinner, his wife had lied so easily. "Oh, she loved it, honey. She was so touched," Isabella had said on the phone. "She cried. You should have seen it. She said you're the best son a mother could ever have." Ruth had cried. David could see it in the videos. But she wasn't crying because she was happy. She was crying because she felt humiliated and lonely. She ate a cold sandwich alone in the basement, while Isabella posted photos of a fake family dinner on social media, using old pictures to make everyone think everything was perfect. David's investigation found something even more scary and wrong. He discovered that Isabella had a private group chat on WhatsApp called Malibu Elite Wives. In this secret group, she shared mean updates about Ruth with her rich and racist friends. "David's old maid is getting more and more confused," Isabella had written. "Yesterday, I found her trying to use the master bathroom again. I had to remind her where she belongs. These people never learn their place." Her friends' responses were just as mean and hateful. "At least you have patience, dear. I would have sent her back to the poor neighborhood where she belongs," wrote Jennifer Walsh, whose husband was the CEO of Walsh Industries. "David needs to understand that being nice has limits. It's one thing to help these people. It's another thing to turn your home into a homeless shelter," wrote Patricia Sterling, who came from a rich real estate family. But Isabella's response made David's blood run cold with anger. "Don't worry, girls. I'm writing down all of her confused moments. Once I have enough proof that she has memory problems and can't take care of herself, I'll convince David that she needs professional care in a nursing home. Problem solved forever." David closed his laptop. His hands were shaking with anger. Isabella wasn't just being mean to Ruth. She was planning and scheming to remove Ruth from their lives permanently. That night, David pretended to be asleep when Isabella came home from the spa. Through half-closed eyes, he watched his wife check messages on her phone, smiling with satisfaction as she read updates from her hate group. "David," Isabella whispered, gently shaking him. "I need to talk to you about Ruth tomorrow. Some concerning things have happened while you were away." David mumbled something that didn't make sense, pretending to be sleepy, while Isabella prepared for another award-winning performance as the worried, caring wife. The next day during breakfast, which Ruth cooked, and which Isabella only allowed when David was home, the fake acting began. "Honey, I don't want to worry you, but your mother has been having some confusing episodes lately," Isabella said, gently touching David's arm with fake concern in her voice. "Yesterday, I found her trying to cook at 3 in the morning, completely confused about what day it was." Ruth stopped pouring coffee, her eyes filled with panic. David could see that she wanted to defend herself and tell the truth. But she had learned through months of abuse that if she spoke up, it would only make things worse for her. "She's also been leaving the bathroom water running and forgetting to close doors," Isabella continued. Each lie was delivered like she had practiced it many times. "I'm worried she might hurt herself. Maybe it's time we found some professional help for her." David watched Ruth shrink and become smaller with every lying word. The dignity and pride she had kept through decades of hard times was being destroyed piece by the woman David had trusted to protect her. That's when a specific memory came flooding back with full force. David remembered being 12 years old, coming home from school with a cut lip. He had gotten into a fight with boys who called him an orphan bastard. Ruth had sat him down in the kitchen of their small Chicago home, cleaned his wounds, and said something he never forgot. "Baby, some people will try to make you feel small because they feel small inside themselves. But you need to remember, you carry inside you the strength of all the ancestors who fought so that you could be here. And one day, when you're big and strong, you'll protect other people just like I protect you now." Ruth had kept her promise to protect him. She worked 3 jobs to pay for his computer classes. She sold her own jewelry to buy his first computer. She stayed up all night helping him with school projects even after working double shifts at the hospital. Now it was time for David to keep his promise to protect her. "Interesting," David said calmly, taking a sip of coffee. "And where exactly would you suggest she get this professional help?" Isabella's eyes sparkled because she thought she was winning. "Well, Sunny Acres is a very respected nursing home. They have experience with people in her situation." David knew about Sunny Acres. It was an expensive nursing home that mainly took care of wealthy white families who wanted to get rid of inconvenient relatives while still feeling good about themselves. "You've already researched this," David noted, keeping his voice neutral and calm. "I just want what's best for her," Isabella lied, touching his arm again. "And for us? We have our own lives to live." At that moment, David realized that his wife had completely underestimated 2 very important things. First, that the abandoned boy from Chicago had never really disappeared. He was just hiding under a surface of wealth and fancy things. And second, that Ruth Williams had taught this boy something way more valuable than computer programming. She had taught him that true strength doesn't come from having money or power. It comes from knowing exactly when and how to use them to protect the people you love. As Isabella kept talking about her plans to get rid of Ruth, for the good of everyone, David quietly opened the recording app on his phone. Because some conversations needed to be saved forever. And some people needed to be reminded that underestimating a son protecting his mother could be the most costly mistake anyone could ever make in their entire life. What Isabella didn't know was that every cruel word, every planned lie, and every moment of meanness was being carefully documented by someone who had learned from childhood that patience is just another word for strategy. And that when the time came to act, nothing would remain of the perfect world she had built on top of an innocent woman's suffering. For the next 3 days, David acted like the perfect busy husband while quietly organizing the most important investigation of his life. Each morning, he watched Isabella play the role of the concerned, caring wife during breakfast. She invented new stories about Ruth being confused, while Ruth herself served coffee with shaking hands. Yesterday, I found her trying to call someone at 4 in the morning. Isabella lied while delicately eating her French toast. When I asked who she was calling, she said she wanted to talk to you. But you were right there sleeping next to me. She's clearly confused about time and space. David watched Ruth lower her eyes sadly. He knew the truth. She had been trying to call a former work colleague from Chicago who was sick in the hospital. David had discovered this information in the security recordings when Isabella deliberately hung up the phone and then lied, saying no one had answered. Maybe we should speed up the process with Sunny Acres, Isabella continued, her voice full of fake urgency. They have an opening next week. It would be perfect. That's when David knew he had very little time. Isabella wasn't just planning to get rid of Ruth. She was speeding up her evil timeline. That afternoon, while Isabella was at her weekly massage appointment at the spa, David drove downtown to meet someone his assistant had quietly recommended. Marcus Rivera was a former police detective who now worked as a private investigator. He specialized in cases about domestic abuse and family fraud. Rivera's office was on the 3rd floor of a plain building downtown, far away from the fancy social circles of Malibu, where Isabella might recognize him. When David walked in, he found a man in his 50s with graying hair and eyes that looked like they had seen everything. Mr. Thompson, Rivera stood up and shook his hand. Your assistant gave me a general idea of what's happening, but I need to hear it directly from you. David opened his laptop and showed him the security recordings from the last few months. Rivera watched silently, taking notes sometimes. His face became harder and angrier with each new piece of evidence showing cruelty. This is organized, systematic abuse, Rivera said quietly after seeing Isabella force Ruth to sleep in the freezing basement. And this false paperwork she's creating, it's preparation for putting someone in a nursing home against their will. I've seen it before. I need more than home videos, David said. I need something that will completely destroy her believability before she can have my mother committed. Rivera leaned forward and connected a device to David's laptop. Let's start with a complete computer analysis of her cell phone and computer. If she's writing down lies about your mother, she's also leaving digital traces of her true plans. The investigator explained that they would need to have Isabella's devices for at least 2 hours to get all the data. David immediately thought of next Friday's charity dinner, where Isabella always left her cell phone on the charger all night. And there's something else, Rivera continued, showing printouts of the WhatsApp group messages. This Malibu elite wives group might be involved in other discriminatory activities. If we can get the full chat history, we might have enough material to expose a much bigger pattern of prejudice among Malibu's rich people. While driving back home, David got a call from his personal lawyer, James Walsh. Ironically, James was the brother of Jennifer Walsh, who was a member of Isabella's racist group. David, my brother told me something troubling, James said right away. Apparently Isabella is talking to lawyers about guardianship proceedings. She's claiming that your mother has dementia and needs a legal guardian. David's blood ran cold. If Isabella got a guardianship order from a judge, she would have the legal power to put Ruth in a nursing home against her will. She could even stop Ruth from talking to David. James, I need you to prepare counter paperwork immediately, and I want you to cancel any legal power Isabella might have over my mother's affairs. David, that might alert her that you're investigating, James warned. I don't care, David said firmly. I'm not going to let her legally kidnap my mother while I gather evidence. That evening, David found Ruth alone in the garden. She was watching the stars from a small wooden bench she had asked to have placed there. It was the only personal request she had made in a whole year of living with them. Mom, David sat down beside her. I need to ask you a question, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Ruth turned to him with those eyes that had seen so many battles in life. Of course, baby. What do you want to know? Has Isabella been treating you well when I'm not around? For a long moment, Ruth stayed quiet. David could see her struggling inside between protecting him from the painful truth and trusting him as the man she had raised to face injustice. She has her concerns, Ruth finally said, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes I think it would be better if I went back to Chicago. Maybe I'm too old to fit into a place like this. Mom, look at me. David held her hands. You've adapted to much harder things than this. You came from Taiwan, learned English, worked 3 jobs, raised me alone, and made me the person I am today. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong wherever you choose to be. Tears appeared in Ruth's eyes. Sometimes I forget what a brave boy you were. Always defending other kids on the playground. Always fighting against unfairness. I'm still that boy, Mom, David said. And now it's my turn to defend you. As they walked home together, David noticed Isabella watching from the second-floor window. Her cell phone was pressed to her ear. She was clearly reporting something to someone. Probably more fake evidence of Ruth's growing confusion. David smiled slightly. Let her continue to underestimate the situation. Every call, every message, every moment of planned cruelty was being documented and analyzed. Isabella had built her hate campaign on the belief that David would never discover the truth. But she had made the most deadly mistake any bad person can make. She had attacked the wrong person. Ruth Williams wasn't just David Thompson's mother. She had raised a strategist, a fighter, and someone who had learned from childhood that sometimes justice must be served with surgical precision. The next morning, Rivera sent the first analysis of the data. What they found was even worse than David had imagined. Isabella wasn't just abusing Ruth. She was working together with other wives of Malibu's rich and famous to solve other, inconvenient family problems. The WhatsApp group showed conversations about how several of them had gotten rid of elderly or unwanted relatives using similar tactics. It was an organized conspiracy of elder abuse disguised as family concern. David printed everything out and stored the evidence in a digital safe that even Isabella didn't know existed. Every cruel message, every humiliating photo, every calculated plan was now preserved forever. As he watched Isabella prepare yet another fake performance for breakfast, David remembered something Ruth had taught him when he was 12. Some boys at school had teased him for having a different kind of mother. Baby, Ruth had said, some people think strength means shouting louder or hitting harder. But true strength is quiet. It grows, prepares, and waits for the right moment. And when that moment comes, it doesn't just win. It teaches a lesson that will never be forgotten. Isabella was about to discover that she had chosen the wrong target for her cruelty. And when the lesson came, it would be as complete and devastating as the years of humiliation she had put on the one person David would never allow to be hurt. What Isabella couldn't imagine was that every fake smile, every elaborate lie, and every moment of sadism wasn't just being recorded. It was building the foundation of her own destruction. Because when you underestimate a son defending his mother, you're not just making a tactical mistake. You're unleashing a force that can completely rewrite the rules of the game you thought you were winning. The Friday of the charity dinner arrived just as Isabella had planned. It would be her last performance before she could have Ruth committed permanently to a nursing home. As she got ready in her room, David finished preparations for the biggest twist of her life. Rivera had accomplished everything. The complete computer analysis of Isabella's cell phone revealed not only months of documented cruelty, but a conspiracy involving 6 other wives of Malibu's rich and famous who systematically abused inconvenient elderly family members. Mr. Thompson, Rivera called one last time. I'm in contact with journalists from the LA Times and TMZ. When you give the signal, this story will explode on all platforms at the same time. David watched Isabella walk down the stairs in her designer dress. She was glowing with happiness because she thought victory was so close. She didn't even notice that Ruth was no longer wearing her cleaning uniform. David had burned them all and replaced them with decent clothes. Honey, the Sunny Acres van is coming to pick up your mother on Monday, Isabella said while touching up her lipstick. I've already signed all the paperwork as her legal representative. Problem solved forever. Interesting, David said, pulling out his cell phone. Because I just got a very enlightening call from Dr. Peterson at Sunny Acres. Isabella's smile got a little weaker. What kind of call? He wanted to confirm that I had actually given you permission to forge my signature on the admission documents, David said, showing her the phone screen. Apparently, falsifying medical documents is a serious federal crime. Isabella's face turned pale, but she tried to stay calm. I don't know what you're talking about. It's also interesting how carefully you documented my mother's episodes of dementia, David interrupted, swiping his finger across the screen to show screenshots of Isabella's fake notes. Especially considering she passed all the cognitive tests I secretly arranged for her last week. You spied on me? Isabella's mask of kindness began to crack and fall apart. No, I protected my family from a dangerous person, David said. He opened the security camera app. Ruth, please come here. Ruth appeared in the room. She was no longer hunched over in fear. She stood tall and dignified. Isabella watched her with growing horror. This was no longer the broken woman she had spent months destroying. Ruth has something to say, Isabella. In fact, she has months of things to say. David, baby, Ruth began in a steady, strong voice. Your wife forced me to sleep in the basement during winter. She forced me to eat cold leftovers on the floor like an animal. She called me terrible names I would never repeat. Isabella tried to protest, but David raised his hand to stop her. Oh, but there's more. Much more. He connected his cell phone to the giant TV in the living room. Messages from the Malibu Elite Wives group began appearing on the screen. Every racist word, every cruel plan, every moment of sadism was exposed in high definition for everyone to see. David's old maid is getting more and more confused, David read out loud from the messages. I had to remind her where she belongs. Isabella backed away, pure panic replacing her confidence. You can't do this. This is private. You know what else is interesting? David continued without mercy. Jennifer Walsh, Patricia Sterling, all your friends, they don't know you saved these conversations. And tonight at the charity dinner where you'll all be together, this will be shown on a big screen for the entire Malibu elite to see. You wouldn't dare, Isabella said, her voice shaking. I already have. David showed a series of notifications on his phone. TMZ, LA Times, page 6, they all have the story. Malibu elite wives run elder abuse scheme, including photos of you forcing my mother to wear a maid's uniform. Isabella collapsed into an armchair. Reality was finally hitting her. My life, my reputation, you've destroyed everything. I didn't destroy anything, David said coldly. You built your life on cruelty and lies. I just turned on the lights. Isabella's phone began ringing over and over again. First, it was Jennifer Walsh. Isabella, what are those photos on TMZ? Then it was Patricia Sterling. You've gotten us into huge trouble. And there's more. David continued without stopping. My lawyer has already filed for divorce. You're going to leave this house with exactly what you brought when you arrived. Nothing. The prenuptial agreement you signed is very clear about cheating and family abuse. Prenup? Isabella looked shocked. You said we didn't need one. I lied, David said simply. Just like you lied about everything else. He leaned forward. And you know what the best part is? All your fake documentation about my mother's dementia, it's perfect evidence of attempted medical fraud. The FBI is already interested in investigating. Isabella tried one last desperate move. No one will believe you. I'm a respected woman. Really? David smiled coldly. A billionaire man with security cameras, computer evidence, and witnesses versus a woman who has just been exposed nationally for abusing a 67-year-old woman? Good luck with that defense. Her cell phone rang again. This time it was her own lawyer. Isabella, I have to inform you that I can no longer represent you. There's a conflict of interest with other clients affected by this situation. Your friends are all distancing themselves, David observed. Apparently, being exposed as a racist and an abuser isn't very good for one's social image. Isabella finally broke down completely. Please, David, we can work this out. I'll change. Ruth can stay. We'll go to therapy, anything. The time to change was before you turned the woman who raised me into your personal victim, David said firmly. Ruth approached Isabella for the first time in months without any fear. You don't have to change for me, ma'am. You just have to get out of my family's life. David watched his wife fall apart completely. The woman who had built her entire identity on social status and moral superiority was now hated by everyone across the nation. But David felt no pleasure in her destruction, only the cold satisfaction of seeing justice served. There's a car waiting for you outside, David said calmly. Your bags are already packed inside. And Isabella, if you try any revenge against my mother or me, remember, I have resources you can't even dream of. And now I know exactly what kind of person you really are. As Isabella left the mansion she had used as a stage for her cruelty for the very last time, she still didn't fully understand what David had organized. Because the true extent of her downfall would only become clear when she discovered that losing her life of luxury was only the beginning. The consequences of underestimating a son protecting his mother would extend far beyond what her privileged mind could imagine. 1 year later, David watched Ruth teach basic computer programming to underprivileged children at the community center he had funded in her honor. At 68 years old, Ruth radiated energy and life that had been suppressed by months of abuse. Remember, kids, Ruth said in a firm, strong voice. Technology is a tool for justice. You can use it to build bridges where others build walls. The children listened with wide eyes, inspired by this amazing woman who had overcome so much. Isabella, meanwhile, had become a person no one wanted to be around throughout all of Los Angeles. Her former friends publicly rejected her after the national scandal. She was living in a modest apartment, supported by a limited divorce settlement because of the prenuptial agreement. She discovered that privilege without good character is only a temporary illusion that disappears quickly. David had received a message from Isabella the week before. I was a different person. Can we try again? He deleted it without replying. Some bridges, once burned by cruelty, should never be rebuilt. Do you know why we won? Ruth asked as they drove home from the community center. Because you remembered that true strength isn't about having power. It's about using it to protect the people we love. David smiled, looking at the woman who had turned an abandoned boy into a man of principle and values. Isabella had tried to destroy Ruth, but she had only revealed that some people are indestructible, forged and made strong by decades of unconditional love and sacrifice. The best revenge was never to repay the damage done. It was to prove that love always conquers hate, and that defending our family is the only wealth that truly matters. Ruth continued her work at the community center, teaching not just programming, but life lessons about kindness, dignity, and standing up for what's right. Children from all backgrounds came to learn from her, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, all united in their respect for this remarkable woman who had turned her pain into purpose. David expanded the center's programs, creating scholarships in Ruth's name for underprivileged students who wanted to study technology. He made sure that Ruth's story, both the pain and the triumph, was shared to inspire others facing discrimination and abuse. You know what the most important lesson is? Ruth told her students one day, it's not about the technology you learn or the money you make. It's about remembering where you came from and helping others climb the same ladder you did. That's what real success looks like. David stood at the back of the room, watching his mother teach with the same passion she had shown when helping him with homework in their tiny Chicago apartment decades ago. Some things never changed. Ruth's commitment to lifting others up, her refusal to let circumstances define her worth, her unwavering belief that education and love could change the world. The scandal had indeed changed Malibu's social scene. Several other wives in the elite wives group faced their own reckonings. Some lost their social standing, others their marriages. The incident sparked conversations about elder abuse, racism, and the responsibility that comes with privilege. While not everyone learned the lesson, enough people did to make a difference. As for Isabella, she eventually moved to another state, trying to rebuild her life away from the spotlight of her shame. David heard she was working a regular job, living a regular life, far from the luxury she had once taken for granted. He hoped, for her sake, that she had truly learned something from the experience. But David's focus wasn't on Isabella's fate. It was on building a legacy worthy of the woman who had saved him. Together with Ruth, they created programs that helped adoptive families, supported elderly individuals living alone, and provided resources for people facing discrimination. This is what it was all for, wasn't it, Mom? David said one evening as they reviewed scholarship applications together. All those years of struggle, all those sacrifices, they led to this moment where we can help others. Ruth squeezed his hand, tears of joy in her eyes. Baby, every hard moment was worth it to see the man you've become. You didn't just succeed for yourself. You succeeded so you could lift others up. That's the greatest victory of all. The best revenge, they both knew, wasn't destroying Isabella. It was building something beautiful from the ashes of her cruelty. It was proving that one person's hate could be transformed into a movement of love. It was showing the world that family isn't defined by blood or race or social status. It's defined by who stands beside you when the world tries to tear you down. If you believe that justice and family come before anything else, subscribe for more stories that prove protecting the people we love is the only battle worth fighting. Because in a world that sometimes feels cold and cruel, we need reminders that love, dignity, and courage will always triumph over hate. Hit that like button if this story moved you. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message today, and subscribe so you never miss stories that celebrate justice, family, and the power of standing up for what's right. Drop a comment and let us know. Have you ever had to stand up for a family member against injustice? Your story matters, and this community wants to hear it. If you were in David's position and discovered someone was secretly abusing a family member you love, what would you do? Would you confront them immediately or gather evidence first like David did? Share your honest thoughts below.